Ako vidite ovu poruku, to znači da sam otet od strane izraelske vojske. Poruke su to 12 aktivista sa Flotile. Brod Madleen u vlasništvu i organizaciji Flotile Coalition bio je na putu ka pojasu Gaze s humanitarnim teretom koji je uključivao hranu, medicinske potrepštine i baby formulu. Misija je pokušala da odgovori na sve dublju humanitarnu krizu u Gazi gdje više od 2 miliona ljudi trpi posljedice višemjesečne blokade i razornih sukoba. Pozivam sve svoje prijatelje i porodicu i saborce da izvrše pritisak na švedsku vladu da što prije pusti mene i ostale na slobodu. Izraelska vojska je nasilno prestrela brod i upotrijebila tehnička sredstva za ometanje komunikacije, uključujući dronove i ometanje radija. Sve su uživo prenosili aktivisti Flotile. Na snimcima koji su objavili i organizatori i izraelske vlasti vidi se kako su aktivisti sprovedeni u izraelsku luku Aždod gdje im je oduzet teret, a oni su pritvoreni.
The IDF is here right now. Please sound the alarm. We are being surrounded by their boats. Yes. This is an interception. A war crime is happening right now. Please sound the alarm.
Organizatori navode da se brod nalazi u međunarodnim vodama u trenutku presretanja, što ukazuje na mogući akt nezakonitog presretanja civilnog broda, zabranjen međunarodnim konvencijama, uključujući Konvenciju Ujedinjenih nacija o pravu mora. Prema toj konvenciji, civilni brodovi koji plove pod zastavom suverene države u međunarodnim vodama ne mogu i ne smiju biti zaustavljeni bez jasnog pravnog osnova. Humanitarni teret broda prema izraelskim vlastima bit će preusmjeren ka Gazi kroz, kako kažu, postojeće humanitarne kanale, ali međunarodne organizacije već duže vrijeme upozoravaju da takvi kanali ne omogućavaju dovoljan priliv pomoći. Posljednjih sedmica zabilježeni su i smrtonosni incidenti u kojima su deseci Palestinaca izgubili život pokušavajući da dođu do pomoći. Ovo nije prvi put da se brodovi Flotile Coalitiona suočavaju sa izraelskom intervencijom, ali ovaj incident posebno osjetljiv zbog prisustva poznatih ličnosti i činjenice da se operacija odvijala izvan izraelskih teritorijalnih voda. U momentu presretanja brod je bio pod britanskom zastavom, što dodatno komplikuje pravni aspekt cijelog slučaja, jer implicira obavezu Ujedinjenog kraljevstva da zaštiti svoja plovila, ali i državljane, u skladu sa međunarodnim normama. Organizacije za ljudska prava i pomorski pravni stručnjaci već su počeli da analiziraju mogućnosti pravnih koraka protiv izraelskih vlasti zbog, kako se navodi, piratstva nad humanitarnom misijom. U međuvremenu, humanitarna situacija u Gazi ostaje kritična. Ujedinjene nacije su u više navrata upozorile na mogućnosti masovne gladi, a civilno stanovništvo i dalje trpi zbog ograničenog pristupa osnovnim sredstvima za život. Izrael je 2. marta uveo potpunu humanitarnu blokadu Gaze, prekinuvši opskrbu hranom, medicinskim potrepštinama i drugom pomoći za više od 2 miliona Palestinaca koji žive na tom teritoriju već 11 sedmica. Brazilian human rights activist Thiago Ávila knew the risks when he boarded the Madleen, a small vessel loaded with humanitarian aid bound for Gaza. But he never imagined he would end up in spending 4 excruciating days in Israeli custody, including 2 in solitary confinement, infested with cockroaches and bedbugs, enduring sleep deprivation and psychological pressure, detained for his role in trying to break the naval blockade on Gaza. Ávila has emerged more determined than ever. As organizers of the Flotile Coalition prepare another voyage, Ávila says he's already signed up. Thiago Ávila is joining me from Brazil in these moments. Thiago, welcome to the program and thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Ika. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you, Thiago. It's such an honor and pleasure to see that you are doing well. Thiago, you boarded the Madleen with a clear humanitarian mission, knowing full well the risks. Can you take us back to that moment the ship left the port? What was going through your mind? What did you believe when you were sailing into? Who was on board and what was the Madleen carrying in sense of humanitarian aid supplies?
It's very good to remember that, Ika, because at the moment we managed to sail on June the 1st,
I was so happy because we've been trying. The Freedom Flotilla exists for 17 years to expose and to challenge an illegal siege of 18 years in Gaza imposed by Israel as part of a genocide and ethnic cleansing of 8 decades. So when we were sailing, we were finally saying that after 17 years, because the first 5 missions they managed to get to Gaza, all the other ones have been intercepted or attacked after that. And then when we finally managed to sail, I said, look, I'm so happy because it's been 7 years since a Freedom Flotilla mission didn't manage to sail. 2018 was the last one that managed to get there and go all the way until Gaza, until we face and challenge the siege. So we've been trying since the escalation of genocide 21 months ago, for example, we've been trying to take first 3 big vessels with 5,500 tons of humanitarian aid, and we've been defeated by bureaucratic warfare. And then we tried with a small boat called the Handala, and the engine broke. And then we tried with a big boat called the Conscience that was bombed by Israel 1.5 months ago, and by 2 Israeli drones. And then we went with a small boat, the Madleen, with 12 people, 18-meter boat, with, of course, because of its size, with a limited amount of food, of medicine, of crutches, of prosthetics for amputated children, of water filters. We were bringing everything we could on that small boat, but it was a small boat nonetheless. And then when we finally managed to sail, I was so happy to see that we defeated the bureaucratic warfare. We are on our way. And I knew that when we got on our way, the world will listen to it. Not listen to 12 people, but will listen to the Palestinian struggle and the right to live in peace. So I was very, very happy when we sailed. We had the best team I could imagine. We had Greta, who is on screen right now, a climate activist. We had Rima Hassan, a European member of parliament from France. We had Yasmin, also a coordinator with me. We had a doctor called Baptiste from France. We had a Turkish citizen, Schweib, who is a genius to make everything work. We had a beautiful crew, most of French citizens. We have Mark, we had Reva, we had Pascal, we had Sergio, our engineer, and we had 2 media as well, one from international big media outlet, another from a documentarist, a filmmaker from France. And those 12 people had a mission to make sure the world will not forget about Palestine, will not forget about the illegal siege. And if we could, and if the mobilization was big enough, we'll manage to break the siege and get to Gaza and to create a people's humanitarian corridor. So that was our mission. We knew that we were facing a huge danger, a huge risk. I was responsible for training, nonviolence training for our people, or training emergency situations in case of an attack. And people were very aware of the risk and the possibilities. We always say that a flotilla mission, a Freedom Flotilla mission, has 4 macro scenarios, Ika. We can either be defeated at port through bureaucratic warfare, but we didn't. We managed to sail. And once we managed to sail, we had the 3 other possibilities. One was to get to Gaza and to open a people's humanitarian corridor, and that's why we were going. But due to our experience of 17 years, we knew there were other possibilities as well, that we could get intercepted, kidnapped, imprisoned, and then deported by Israel, illegally doing this, committing a war crime, or we could even get attacked, like 15 years ago when they killed 10 of our members, or 1.5 months ago when they bombed our boat. So we were there very happy to be sailing. We knew the risks, but we were enthusiastic about it.
And you speak about it with such enthusiasm, with such passion as well. So that happened, actually, Thiago, in the early hours of June 9. Your ship was intercepted into international waters by the Israeli Navy military. You mentioned that the IDF, and we've all seen it, we were watching it in real time. We were watching you saying, sound the alarm. The IDF has surrounded us. And they used a white substance against your vessel as well. Can you describe in detail what really happened that night? How did you guys feel? What did you see? What did you smell? What happened in those critical minutes for you? How did you and the crew respond under such pressure?
Yeah, Zika, thank you so much for bringing this up, because if we were not so restricted by the big techs, for example, by Meta, we would be doing a live all the time and people would be accompanying step by step. Because of all the restrictions, we could only publish the posts So it was one post about 5 hours before when they intercepted our navigation systems, and we were navigating only on manual. And so we lost all the navigation systems more than 100 nautical miles away from Gaza, closer to the Egyptian shore, for example. After that, they started bringing the drones like they did the last 5 nights before. Then the drones started to get closer, and then they brought 3 huge Navy vessels surrounding us and 2 small speedboats that crossed us right in front of us. And then we sounded the first alarm, but those speedboats disappeared, and the Navy vessels that were surrounding us, they moved further away from us. So we had sounded the alarm, but there was no interception or attack happening at that moment. And then the drones came. And then when the drones came, they were the quadcopters, the ones that they use in Gaza to assassinate children, for example, attaching a rifle to it or attaching bombs to it, the same ones that bombed our boat 1.5 months ago, the Conscience boat. So we didn't know if it was an interception or if it was an attack. So we asked everyone to take cover, like we had practice, like we had made so many drills about it every single day. And we were preparing, and the drone started bringing light and sound and throwing chemical substances at us, this white paint stuff, the black powder as well. So those things are being investigated in Europe. I'm not aware of that. It's being done by other people who managed to live to get their clothes from the attack back. And so we are still investigating. We are not aware of what it was. And then they did all this, and we were sounding the alarm. So the first video was, they jammed our communication, and they were speaking over the radio, counting to 1 to 100 so that we could not ask for help on the radio. They were bringing the drones and trying to blind us or put us inside the cockpit so that we would not see the speedboats coming. So in the end, after a moment, those 4 speedboats full of IOF commandos boarded our boat. And when they were boarding our boat, we had the places that everyone had to stay. Everyone has a specific position on an interception.
Yes, we've seen that.
For example, I was the person right on the corner to be the first contact with them. I was supposed to negotiate with them if we had the possibility of doing that. We were, for example, we were moving all of our women participants away from the stairs of the boat, because if they drag the women downstairs, they do so many sexual violence, the Israeli soldiers, that we should prevent that. So you can see that they're all further away from the stairs. But so we were planning every single detail to increase our chances of returning from this mission alive, with our physical integrity and free. So that was the 3 main objects in case we were attacked or intercepted. And when they eventually came, we did our best, and people had a good response time, and people maintained nonviolence, because we train everyone that no matter how much cruelty, how much violence, we must remain nonviolent. That's why people in the world trust us so much, because they know it's a humanitarian mission. They know they have nothing to say about us. Of course, they will invent, they will create stuff, but the people will see that our conduct was perfect from the moment we started until the moment we were attacked. So yeah, we did our best, and they did their cruelty, kidnapping and attack on a humanitarian mission against international law, but we kept our dignity, and we kept on mobilizing people, and even the attack served a purpose to show how cruel they are. Exactly. Despite the fact that this time they didn't use that much violence. The other interceptions from 17 years, they tortured, they assaulted people. This time they wanted to do a publicity stunt. So it was a bit challenging as well.
Yes, you were marked as selfie flotilla, selfie yacht, selfie Greta, selfie Thiago. And when they apprehended you, when they arrested you, and you said you were kidnapped, they did release a video of you being handed sandwiches and water. I think even Rima, she was smiling to them, showing the resilience of a woman in such a stressful situation. What happened when you arrived to Israel, when you arrived to the port? Because all the communication with you guys completely disappeared. No one was able to get a hold of you. And 24 hours later, we found out that you were in detention as well. So what happened when you were in the hands of the IDF? What happened forward?
Yes, after they intercepted our boat, they changed our course. We were 100 nautical miles from Gaza, around that distance. And then they changed our course. Instead of going to Gaza, to go to Israel, to the port of Ashdod. And they kept us for 20 hours on our boat, first for 8 hours on the top deck and then for 12 hours on the below the deck, and we could not go into the other area of the boat that we were not allowed to. And then they finally took us to Ashdod port. They cleared the port from press, so no media was allowed. So it was only their operative of police, of army, and their own cameramen doing that publicity stunt. And so they took all of our stuff. They destroyed all of the electronic equipment that we had on the boat. They took away all the Palestinian flags. They made people take off their clothes that had Free Palestine, for example. And they put us in Ashdod port. They took a lot of pictures of us being like processed at port on a line surrounded by Israeli soldiers to show their power as well. And then they put us in front of a table where a guy came with a document and said, you want to go home? If you want to go home, you need to sign this document. And the document said that we were trying to enter Israel illegally and we were caught, and that's why we were being deported, and that's why we would accept to be banned from going to Israel for 100 years. And of course we said, we didn't commit this crime. You kidnapped us against international law. Of course we will not sign that. And then they took us, me, Greta, Rima Hassan, and Yasmin, to go upstairs to where an ex-IOF spokesperson was asking us to watch a video of the October 7th. And then we said, we will watch a video of the more than 18,000 children that you've been killing, the identified ones, because of course there is more. If you do, we can watch any video, but if you don't, we will not be part of your publicity stunt. And then they took us downstairs and said, oh, how intolerant you are. You don't want to see our suffering and everything. And we just didn't want to see the war propaganda videos that they are doing to enable a genocide.
You asked them to watch the videos of children being killed in Gaza as well. Is that correct?
Because we didn't want to be part of their publicity stunt. They were doing that just to try to deceive the world, to say that we were intolerant and stuff. And we said, no, if you do watch all the genocide that you're committing and you don't try to do this as a publicity stunt, we can watch anything. But the problem is that they didn't want that.
Exactly, those were the headlines all around the world by the propaganda media, that you guys didn't want to even know what happened on October 7th, which is not the truth. Thiago, during your detention, you spent time even in solitary confinement as a punishment, it seems, for a leadership role in a hunger strike. Can you share what that isolation did to you psychologically? What was Israeli prison really like for you, psychologically, physically? How did that happen?
You know, when we were there, we made a decision that when we get back home, we will not talk about the conditions in Israeli prison because of two things. First of all, because we were not treated as bad as they treat Palestinians. There are more than 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli dungeons right now. Over 400 of them are children. And so we said, this is nothing compared to what other Palestinian prisoners go through. And also because we want to put the spotlight on the genocide and the blockade in Gaza, the illegal siege for 18 years. So we said we will not talk about it. But the problem is that when we got back home, 3 of our brothers stayed behind because Israel attacked Iran and closed the airport. So they stayed behind. And then we had to tell the world that they were not having a good time. So what we said is that the prison was, from the early moments that we got there, the Givon prison, was an environmental violation indeed. So people were sleep deprived, people were all the time woken up like almost every hour with noise and shouts to get up, get up, get up. And there were always bed bugs on the bed, so people would start to have problems with the skin. The water had a bad smell, a bad taste for people who drank it, and a bad odor as well. So yeah, that was an environmental violation. We could not have any contact with the outside world. So we never spoke to our families when we were in Israeli custody. The lawyers had a very hard time to reach out to us, and the diplomatic representatives as well had a very hard time to reach out to us. So they put us on this cell, and then we had a court hearing. And when we got to the court hearing, there was an Israeli judge, and she was asking the same thing. Why did you try to enter Israel illegally? And I said the same thing. You've been committing genocide and ethnic cleansing for 8 decades. You structure yourself as an apartheid colonial state. You are led by a racist and supremacist ideology called Zionism, and you're being put in Gaza over illegal siege for 18 years and for 21 months committing the most horrific escalation of genocide our generation has ever seen. So I'm not the one who is committing a crime.
What was their reaction, Thiago, when you say something like that? What reaction did you get back from them?
They really hated hearing that. The Palestinian human rights attorneys that were accompanying me, they were actually very relieved, they said, because they cannot say this thing in a colonial state. So they said, finally, there's someone saying that. But the judge was very, very angry by hearing all of that. And then she said, you're on a hunger and thirst strike, right? What are your demands? And I said, we want you to give us back our boat. We want you to give us back the food and the medicine that you stole. We want you to release all of our participants. We want you to lift the blockade over Gaza and to stop the genocide. And she was almost laughing, saying, of course, we'll never do that. And I said, since I understand you're not doing that, what I can say is that we probably see each other again very soon, because the Freedom Flotilla missions will never stop until we continue this genocide, this illegal siege. And then she said, you know, you can be punished for doing the hunger strike and by saying those things. And I said, I'm just a nonviolent human rights activist, and you are the one who's going to choose where a person with this behavior needs to be on your colonial settler state. And then the next day I was put in solitary confinement.
Solitary. And I have to ask you this, Thiago, were there ever moments while you were in Israeli prison when you feared for your life or safety? You, your wife and your one-year-old child were waiting for you back in Brazil. Were there any moments that you really feared that you might never see them again?
You know, Ika, the
mean,
way they were treating us.
Just honestly, how did you feel? Can you take me back to that moment?
Because, you know, they were saying many things when I was in solitary confinement, that I would stay 7 days without having any access to the world, that I would kill myself with a hunger and thirst strike because I was not ingesting any liquid. And they were saying that would take me to a torture camp like the Teiman, that would take me to Gaza. They were saying many, many things. But I knew that the world was watching, and they think they have all the power, but all they have is their hate, their violence, their weapons, and their bombs. And we have all the rest. So I knew we were not alone. We were millions and billions together on that cell. Even on solitary confinement, I didn't feel alone at all. So to be honest, I was not concerned about me. I was concerned about the 10,000 Palestinians, 400 children under their dungeons. And I didn't fear for my life because I knew they were trying to do a publicity stunt against us. Other missions suffered way worse treatment. And then, yes, then we should be concerned that they would assassinate people and do other stuff. By the way they were treating, I knew they would not do that, at least not this mission. Maybe some other mission, they can continue and try to do worse things. But
let's not hope that will not happen. Humanitarian workers and activists bound by international law have every right to do what you did. When you were released from Israeli detention from their prison, what was going through your mind? What happened next? How did that happen? When did you go back home? You were deported from Israel.
Yes, in the end we were deported, but when they took me from solitary confinement, they were still threatening me to take to Gaza or to torture camp, so I didn't know where I was going. I was being taken to, and they took me back to the first prison, and I met all of our participants, and I was so happy to see them and see that they were well. Then I heard that Rima Hassan also went to solitary confinement, and then I heard that everyone was okay, and then they showed me the tickets, and they said, you are asking to be the last one to leave. You will not be the last plane to leave, but you'll be the last one to arrive home, since you live far away in Brazil. All the others are from Europe. So I accepted like everyone else. And then we went into that plane. It took me almost a full day to get back home, flying in a connection flight. When I got back home and I finally got to see my wife, my 1 year and 5 month old daughter called Teresa, I was so happy. And there was hundreds of people waiting for me in the airport, and a lot of people with Palestinian flags. And I started to understand the size that the mission took. And I was so happy. But at the same time, I heard someone whispered in my ear, said, 3 of your participants didn't return because Israel attacked Iran and closed the airport. And Brazil didn't break relations with Israel because even despite the journey. And I was so sad about this 3 news, so I was heartbroken. And then, yeah, the other days were pressuring for our friends to get back, and they're all back home, pressuring for the Brazilian government to break relations. and of course denouncing and exposing another Israeli aggression against the neighboring countries.
Let's talk about Gaza now. You've said you've already committed to returning on another mission. After everything you endured, detention, threats, physical suffering, psychological suffering, what is it that still really drives you to go back? And what does world, through your eyes, should know, what world should know about Gaza when it comes to the time that you spent in Israel, when you saw what was happening and how you were treated, even being threatened to being put in one of the Gaza's prisons, which tells us a lot how they treat humans in prisons. What do you want the world to know about Gaza?
Thank you for the opportunity of talking about it, Ika, because we always say that our mission, it is a high-risk mission, but it's but a small fraction of the risk that the Palestinian people in Gaza goes through every single day. And of course, it demands courage from us to go on a mission like this, but it's a small fraction of the courage that it demands to be a Palestinian living through genocide. The choices, life and death choices that these people had to make to try to get food, to try to go and escape the torture camps and escape the killer drones and escape all the cruelty of this genocide. It demands of them a courage that every single day in every Palestinian would make a movie that would touch the entire world. So we are always there in service for them, in solidarity with them. The world needs to know that there's a genocide going on. Every generation that comes after us is going to talk about this moment. It's very important that everyone in demonstrations, in boycotting, in breaking the boycott of big techs on social media, in disrupting armed factories, going into boats like this, marching to Gaza in any way. We are all together on the same struggle because the vast majority of the world, in a planet of 8 billion people, they know that starving children to death is wrong, that bombing hospitals, shelters, schools, residential areas is wrong. And we need to put an end to that. That's why we keep on going. It's not because we like, it's not because we have adrenaline rush, it's not because we want to show off on social media. We do this because we understand that the Palestinian people are not less important than us, that a baby from Palestine, from Gaza is not less important than my baby. And it's just by mere chance that is not us right there. And eventually, because this system, this imperialist system, this Zionist ideology, trying to reach out to the entire world, in the future could be us. And we need to stop it right now while we still have time.
So have you already decided whether or not you will board another flotilla to Gaza?
Yes, definitely. I want to be part of this. I want to be in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And yeah, whatever I can do, me and my wife, we've been...
Even if you know you might get detained again, by the IDF, by the Israeli government.
Yeah, that's the story of all anti-colonial struggle, Wika. The people of the world, they deserve to be free. They have the right to live in peace, and we cannot be afraid of them. They need to be afraid of the people, because once the people start this historical march for freedom, not all the guns, not all the bombs, not all the hatred and the violence can stop them. I just want to be a good ally of the Palestinian cause, and yes, I'm putting my platform, all that I can do at service of this historical calling of our generation.
You're just a good human, good example for fight for human rights. Thiago, thank you so much for being part of my show. Thank you for speaking for our channel. And please make sure that you take care of yourself. And of course, let's stay in touch and see how this goes on with the flotilla. And of course, I'll see you again.
Thank you so much, Ika. It's a pleasure being here with you, and we are together.
Thank you. We are together. Thank you. Thank you, Thiago. This was Brazilian human rights activist Thiago Ávila, who joined me from Brazil. Thank you. Stay with us. Humanitarna organizacija NERA objavila je vijest da je njihov dugogodišnji saradnik Mahmud Mohamed Rasras ubijen u izraelskom dron napadu u noći 17. juna zajedno s dvoje svoje sinova, 7-godišnjim Nidalom, 5-godišnjim Vardom. Napad je pogodio njihovu porodičnu šatorsku nastambu u Han Yunisu, područje koje je Izrael ranije označio kao sigurnu zonu. Mahmud je bio koordinator za psihosocijalnu podršku pri NERI i tokom posljednjih 14 mjeseci Predano je radio s traumatiziranom djecom i porodicama u Gazi. Vodio je dnevne radionice kroz igru, umjetnost i pjesmu, a njegovi programi su dopirali do hiljada mališana pogođenih ratom. U trenutku napada Mahmud je sa svojom porodicom živio u šatoru nakon što su u maju 2024. godine bili prisilno raseljeni iz Rafaha. Njegova supruga Dunija i dvoje starije djece, Laila 9 i Mohamed 13, teško su ranjeni. Mi odmah razgovaramo sa šefom ANERE. I'm welcoming from Washington, D.C., Sean Carroll, who's joining me in these moments. Sean, first of all, thank you for joining, and of course, condolences for you, your team, and of course, the family of Mahmoud Mohamed Rasras.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for those condolences.
Sean, can you just walk us through to what happened to him, to his two children who were killed, and now two who are heavily wounded as well? Can you tell us more about Mahmoud as well?
Well, as usual with these things, unfortunately, we don't know why he was hit. If he was targeted, he shouldn't have been targeted. All of our staff and consultants and contractors, Mahmoud was very much a part of the ANERE team, although he was not a full-time staff member. But as a contractor, anyone that works with us is vetted by us. We put them through U.S. and international databases vetting to make sure that they're not on any list of designated terrorist organizations or people that support them. So there's no reason that he and his family should have been targeted. But he was killed in a drone strike, an Israeli drone strike, along, as you said, with two of his four children, the two youngest children, and the other two and his wife sustained serious injuries. Hopefully they will all make it, but this is a devastating loss for ANERE and for Gaza and for Palestine and Palestinians, but really for the world. I mean, the work that he was doing, the work as a coordinator of our psychosocial activities, trying to distract children from the war, trying to give them some fun and some games, some laughter and some joy, even if temporary. But it's also the kind of work that needs to be done now and over the long term if we're going to have any hope of mitigating trauma. And it's unimaginable how much trauma there is. I mean, literally, I don't think any of us can imagine just how traumatized the entire population of Gaza is. And when you think about losing someone with these talents and the work he was doing, not just with kids, but with teachers and adults and parents, that's a huge loss.
And this is not the first time that Israel is targeting humanitarian workers. The situation in Gaza is really dire. Can we talk about that situation? You've been to Gaza. We had this conversation just a couple of months ago, if I'm not mistaken. Now, the newest that we know is that there are 4 points of distribution of food, which are operated by the United States and Israel as well. But a lot of people are losing their lives just trying to get some food. Can you tell me what is happening? What sort of distribution centers are these? And how do you assess the situation with distribution of food right now and humanitarian aid as well?
Well, everything that we feared, and when I say we, I mean the whole international humanitarian aid community, UN agencies and international NGOs like ANERE and some of the bigger ones, Save the Children and Oxfam and CARE and others, we warned from the beginning that this mechanism, this so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a very nice name, but was not set up according to humanitarian principles and humanitarian law, which demand, first of all, humanity, and then impartiality and independence. And you're taking away humanity, you're taking away dignity just by the way these sites are set up. They're only 4. They're mostly far away from population centers. People have to walk far. And as you say, they're getting killed waiting in line or as they approach these sites. The numbers seem to be approaching 500 people killed at or near these sites just trying to get food. So everything we feared is coming true, and we're hoping that we can go back to having aid come in the way it was coming in before Israel cut off aid on March 2nd, and for 11, almost 12 weeks, nothing at all got in. And then this new regime of this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was the only way that food aid could come in. Some other aid started to come in other ways, but food aid supposedly only through this mechanism. And I think we're seeing now that that doesn't work. There's not enough. It's too dangerous. You can't mix. When you have a volatile mix of desperation, of real starvation, and we're seeing it in our health clinics, we're seeing it among the populations that our team in Gaza serves, we're seeing starvation. When you have starvation and desperation and not enough aid combined with a staff, a setup of armed so-called humanitarian workers that are really mercenaries. They're hired contractors, ex-special forces and military people who are hired to do logistics and security. That's a volatile mix, and we're seeing people die and be killed. And we're hoping and we're pushing that international donors, the UN agencies, international NGOs can go back to delivering aid the way it's supposed to be delivered. UNRWA, just for its part, over the first 17 months of this war, delivered over 65 million meals, and no one got hurt and much less killed in the course of trying to receive food aid from us. So it's a pretty stark difference in the way this is done. And if we're going to have any hope to save lives, to stave off starvation, we've got to get back to allowing the experts led by UN agencies and the international NGOs to do this the way we know how to do it, in a safe and dignified and productive way.
As according to international humanitarian laws as well, it should allow you and other agencies to reach the civilians. How do you assess the Israeli blockade? On this show, we've had as well Thiago Ávila, one of the Flotile human rights activists as well, who tried to reach Gaza and break the naval blockade of Gaza. Didn't manage to do that. He was put in prison. How do you assess the Israeli continuous blockade of food, humanitarian aid, and the breach of international humanitarian law, which we see happening day in and day out when it comes to civilians in this very small strip that is so densely populated?
Well, politicizing aid, militarizing aid, instrumentalizing aid it's a crime against humanity. It's a war crime anywhere in the world. And that's what we've been seeing. And the experts who were saying that this is a genocide came to that conclusion because of the restriction on aid, particularly food aid. So anything that restricts aid getting to civilians who need it is obviously problematic. And throughout the course of this war, again, those who do this work know that the answer has always been in let the trucks in, open up the borders. Everyone understands there need to be security checks, but have a security regime that allows for a continuous, easy flow of aid coming in. And some of the other, but because that's been closed, borders have been closed, trucks have been blocked, there haven't been enough hours in the border crossings open and then close. They stay closed for weeks. There was a complete blockade for nearly 12 weeks from March 2nd on. And so you have donors and you have governments trying other ways. The Gaza pier, the seaport, which is a complete fiasco, hundreds of millions of dollars spent for just a trickle of aid getting in and had to be dismantled. The airdrops, a desperation measure, and you could say, well, you're getting aid to people and otherwise it wouldn't get to them. Well, the truth is, if you open up the borders and you allow these trucks in, during the recent blockade of 11, nearly 12 weeks, there were thousands of trucks on or near the border and in Jordan and in Egypt that held over 100 million meals worth of food, and it's just been sitting there. Let all of that aid in, and you reduce the desperation, you reduce the looting that you see, because you provide enough or close to enough supply to meet the need, that you don't have desperate looters looting and you don't have war profiteering going on, which is what we're seeing now. So the lack of sufficient food is producing hunger and even some starvation, but it's also producing this opportunities for war profiteering and chaos. And so you've just got an absolute desperate situation where people are desperate and they don't need to be that desperate.
Sean, I have to ask you this. You said that politicizing humanitarian aid is a war crime. Let's talk about accountability. Do you feel desperate, as someone who has been for such a long time in humanitarian waters, to see that there is no accountability when it comes to just getting the food and water to civilians who are trying to survive from day to day? How do you assess the lack of accountability for Israel that is blocking the most essential needs that civilians need at this moment?
Yeah, that's really one of the most tragic, sad things here, that there isn't a recognition among their own leadership and their own population of what this means. I mean, history will judge eventually whether institutions and governments and political leaders and communities helped to ensure that civilians were provided with the aid that international humanitarian law calls for, or whether they were part of blocking that aid. And it's been just so hard to really believe has gone on for so long. I think everyone knew that in the aftermath of October 7th, there would be feelings of revenge, and there would be, and we saw it, but that it's lasted this long, and that so many Israelis, and not just the political leadership, but the society, believe that the answer to their own national security and personal safety is to ethnically cleanse Gaza of Palestinians, or prevent aid from going in so that people starve to death.
It's collective punishment,
is really,
isn't it?
It's really very sad. And collective punishment is also a war crime. And and collective punishment is something that we have seen for decades, unfortunately. This is not something that only started after October 7th. And I think the world has judged Israel and come out against collective punishment, but not in a way that has really provoked the change that's needed. And I think eventually it will come. And I know that there are Israelis and there are people around the world, Jews around the world and non-Jews around the world, who support the idea of Israel, who support the idea of the peaceful coexistence of two states. But every instance of collective punishment goes against those hopes and those possibilities. And what's been very painful is for me to see, and I've done this kind of work for almost 40 years, and I've worked in South Africa and Northern Ireland, and you see that at some point the community recognizes, oh, wait a minute, if we're going to save ourselves, we need to make sure that everyone's saved, that everyone's aspirations, every individual, every family, every community, their aspirations for a normal, safe, dignified, prosperous life full of opportunity is there as well. And then that's very painful to see that there's not a realization of that.
You know, Sean, that's what they say. No one is free until everybody's free. Nobody's free until everybody's free. You know, Gaza has you know, the focus of the world has shifted now to Iran and the United States, and the conflict between Israel and Iran as well. And the Gaza somehow, you know, is sidelined. How do you assess this? What do you think about that? What do we have to do to make sure that the world knows that there's still humanitarian catastrophe and genocide happening in Gaza, and that there are civilians who are still in such need of basic human rights and basic needs? The hospitals are being shattered. There's only 2% of hospitals that are operating now in Gaza. How do we do that, Sean?
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing. I mean, I think this is the conversations need to be had. The focus needs to stay. You're absolutely right that the Israel-Iran war took focus away from Gaza. And at the same time, as many or actually slightly more Palestinians in Gaza were killed by Israelis than all of the Iranians and Israelis were killed in the 12 days of Israel-Iran war. So the killing has gone on unabated. The daily average has actually ticked up a bit during the days of the war. And what's even more difficult, I think, is some large number of those daily killings and injuries are people who are waiting in line for food. So we have to keep talking about it. People need to know that the situation is getting worse, not better in Gaza, and aid has to come in at much greater levels. For much of the war, the amount of aid coming in wasn't nearly enough to meet the need. The average was a little over 100 trucks a day, and in the last few weeks after the 11-week complete blockade, in the last few weeks, there's been about 30 trucks coming in a day, separate from what comes in the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I mean, meals are being delivered through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, just not in the correct, safe way. But there's just not enough aid coming in. So more aid has to come in, and we have to have the conversation about the future. And there are plans. The Arab plan, Arab states have come up for a plan for governance and security that will guarantee Israel's security and provide a pathway towards recovery and reconstruction in Gaza. The only way forward is that Palestinians who want to remain in Gaza can remain in Gaza, and they can rebuild their lives and their communities. And there are a lot of organizations and donors and governments who are ready to support that. But we have to be given the environment to be able to do that work. And we'll keep doing the work even as the war continues. We're running healthcare clinics in Gaza. We're doing what we can to deliver meals, although we're severely handicapped in what we can do. But the only answer is to really recognize that there has to be a full-on effort to meet the human aspirations of a population that is completely under siege, is being attacked, is being killed, is being, it would seem, ethnically cleansed, and that needs to stop and reverse.
And thank you for your work as well and for your dedication. Last time we spoke, and now we're speaking, I see a shift in your demeanor as well, and I know you're sad of losing one of your own. Before I let you go, Sean, can you tell us a little bit more about the family of Mahmoud Mohammed? Can you tell us more about his wife, Dunia, and who's left behind, and the communication that you have with them?
Well, I know that I don't know the family. I only met Mahmoud when I was there in December. The photo you showed was all of us after a day of fun and games and laughter with children that Mahmoud was leading. I found out after he was killed.
Which one on this picture? Which one is Mahmoud?
He's on my left, so looking to
He's
the
on your
right
left.
of me.
All
I've
right.
got my arm around him. He's in the light sweatshirt.
Yes.
There, just
light
a little
gray
shorter than
sweatshirt, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Very young.
And that was
very young man.
Yeah, a young man, but very professional, a psychosocial support professional who, as I said, was working with teachers and parents in addition to the hundreds and thousands of kids. And this team was amazing. We were getting videos from the early days of the war of the work they were doing with kids to try to, as I say, provide some momentary joy and laughter and distract them from the bombs that were falling every day. And that's absolutely critical for maintaining some possibility of wellness and psychosocial well-being. Tremendous amount of work. But I learned afterwards that his wife had Egyptian citizenship and his kids had residency, and they were talking about the possibility that they would move to Egypt when the war stopped and they would be allowed. But he was going to stay. He was talking just hours before he was killed. He was talking with our education director in Palestine about expanding our psychosocial work, and he very much wanted to be a central part of that. And I know that his work him being a father supported his work, and it shone through his work. And I think his kids and his wife were proud of the work that he was doing.
Yes. Sean, thank you so much for taking time to tell us more about him and about your mission in Gaza. And thank you for all your efforts. Chin up. We have to continue. And
have to keep going.
And we have to keep going. And thank you for speaking to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ika. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate it too. Bio je ovo Sean Carroll, humanitarne organizacije ANERA. Ostanite uz nas.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is completely unacceptable, and that's the reason because the High Representative asks an assessment in the terms of Article 2 of the Association Agreement. The report is very clear. They are a systematic violation by Israel of human rights in Gaza. We took note of this report, and we tasked the High Representative in the Minister of Foreign Affairs Council take decisions and to approve the next step.
Bonsoir mesdames et messieurs, merci beaucoup. Sur Gaza, j'ai senti le président Trump très déterminé, très volontaire, conscient de l'importance d'un cessez-le-feu, et je pense que son engagement est essentiel sur cette question, et je sais son équipe engagée sur des discussions en cours. Et donc, vu le drame qui se joue là-bas, je pense que c'est absolument essentiel. Mais la discussion que j'ai eue, voilà, j'ai vu un président qui vraiment était conscient de cela et avait envie d'aboutir à un résultat. Et ma volonté, c'est le plus vite possible